Email notification flashed on my phone at 11:47 p.m. System alert. Primary safety documentation deleted. Authorization T. Caldwell, Jr. I stared at that screen for a solid 30 seconds, watching the rain hammer my windshield in the factory parking lot, trying to process what I was seeing. Trevor Caldwell, Jr., the CEO's 28-year-old son, who'd been handed my department 3 weeks ago, had just deleted 19 years of safety documentation. The same documentation that kept Caldwell Industrial's operating license valid. The same documentation I'd filed with the Illinois Department of Labor back in 2006. Time-stamped, notarized, and registered under state filing number ISM 2006-1847-CD. My name's Marcus Drummond. I'm 51 years old, and until that Tuesday night, I thought I understood how corporate stupidity worked. Turns out I didn't know the half of it. 23 missed calls lit up my phone over the next 4 hours. I ignored every single one. See, what Trevor Jr. didn't know, what none of them knew, was that when you delete the only copy of documentation that the state requires you to maintain, you don't just create a problem, you create a federal case. And when that documentation exists in another location with your signature as the certified author, you become the only person who can save them. I learned a long time ago that power isn't about who sits in the corner office, it's about who controls the paperwork that keeps the lights on. Let me tell you how I got here. Back in 1991, fresh out of 6 years in the Navy as an engineering technician aboard the USS Carl Vinson, I needed work that didn't involve being deployed for 8 months at a time. My wife Catherine was pregnant with our daughter Emma, and we'd just bought a small house in Rockford, Illinois. Civilian life was different. No clear chain of command, no maintenance protocols that could get you court-martialed if you ignored them. But the discipline stuck with me. The understanding that every system, every procedure, every safety protocol exists because someone died when it didn't. Caldwell Industrial hired me in 2004 to work their manufacturing floor. We made industrial pressure vessels, storage tanks, processing equipment for chemical plants. Heavy machinery, dangerous work, the kind of place where one mistake could kill 6 people and level half a city block. The safety manager back then was a guy named Bill Kowalski, about 65 years old, counting down to retirement. He saw something in me. Maybe it was the Navy background, maybe it was the way I documented every near-miss incident while other guys just shrugged them off. "Frank," he'd say, using the nickname that stuck from my middle name, "you think like these systems think. That's rare as hell in this industry." When Bill retired in 2006, I was the natural choice to take over. No fancy degree, but I knew every pressure valve, every welding specification, every federal regulation that governed our operations. More importantly, I understood that safety management isn't about checking boxes. It's about building relationships with the inspectors who can shut you down and the workers who can get killed if you screw up. That first year as safety manager, I did something that would save my career 19 years later. I created a comprehensive safety manual, 347 pages of procedures, equipment specifications, emergency protocols, and regulatory compliance documentation. Every single process we used, every piece of equipment we operated, every chemical we handled. I didn't just write it and file it in some cabinet. I had it notarized, registered it with the Illinois Department of Labor as our official safety documentation, and kept the original signed copy in my personal safe deposit box at First National Bank. The company got the working copy. The state got the filed copy. I kept the proof that I'd created it. Filing number ISM 2006-1847-CD, Marcus Drummond, listed as primary author and certified safety officer. Nobody thought it mattered at the time. Over the next 15 years, I built something that couldn't be replaced. When our biggest client, Petrochem Industries, needed emergency compliance verification for a $50 million contract, I had the documentation ready in 2 hours. When the EPA showed up for a surprise inspection in 2011, I walked them through every environmental protocol we'd implemented, introduced them to our floor managers by name, showed them we were already exceeding the new regulations they'd come to enforce. Inspector Dale Hoffman became more than just a regulator. We'd talk about his son's deployment to Afghanistan, his wife's battle with lupus, his concerns about new industrial standards. When Rebecca Torres joined the state inspection team in 2013, I attended her certification ceremony, congratulated her on her promotion, and made sure she knew Caldwell Industrial was committed to being a model facility. These relationships weren't schmoozing, they were professional respect, and that respect became currency when other companies were fighting million-dollar fines while we sailed through every audit. But here's what it cost me. Catherine died in 2009 from ovarian cancer. She was 36 years old. Emma was only 8, barely old enough to understand why Mommy wasn't coming home from the hospital. For the next 5 years, I was a single father trying to raise a daughter while managing safety operations for a company that ran 3 shifts, 24 hours a day. I missed Emma's 5th grade science fair because we had a pressure vessel failure that could have killed 4 people if I hadn't been there to coordinate the emergency shutdown. Missed her middle school graduation because the state was conducting our annual compliance review. Missed her first high school dance because we were implementing new OSHA protocols and I was training the night shift supervisors. She'd sit at the kitchen table doing homework and I'd be on my laptop reviewing incident reports at 10 p.m. and she'd ask why I was always working. "Building something important, sweetheart," I'd tell her. "Someday you'll understand. Smart kid." She'd just nod and go back to her algebra, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. By 2019, Caldwell Industrial's safety record was exceptional. 15 years without a major incident, 97% compliance rating, one of the lowest insurance premiums in the industry. I'd built a safety culture that other companies studied. Our CEO, Trevor Caldwell Sr., loved showing investors our safety metrics during board presentations. What he didn't love was acknowledging who'd built them. Trevor Sr. was old-school manufacturing. Built Caldwell Industrial from a small fabrication shop into a $70 million operation. He understood equipment and production numbers, but he treated safety like an expensive necessity rather than a core function. As long as the inspectors weren't shutting us down, he was happy. Then his son came back from Stanford. Trevor Caldwell Jr. graduated with an MBA and spent 2 years working at some tech startup in Silicon Valley before Daddy decided it was time for him to learn the family business. Junior arrived at Caldwell Industrial in January 2023 with designer suits, wireless earbuds permanently attached to his skull, and opinions about everything he'd never actually done. The promotion meeting happened on a Monday morning in March. I'd prepared a comprehensive presentation showing our safety performance over the past 3 years. Reduced incident rates by 43%, cut insurance costs by 38%, maintained perfect compliance through 6 major regulatory audits, personally managed the expansion of our chemical processing division without a single safety violation. Trevor Sr. flipped through my report for maybe 4 minutes before setting it aside. "Marcus, I appreciate everything you've done," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "But we need to modernize our safety approach. Bring in some fresh thinking, new methodologies. Trevor Jr. will be taking over as Director of Safety Operations starting next week." Director of Safety Operations, the position I'd held for 17 years. I kept my expression neutral, the way they taught us in the Navy when an officer makes a decision you know is wrong, but you can't challenge. "I see. And what will my role be?" "You'll transition to Senior Safety Consultant, reporting to Trevor. Help him get up to speed on our systems. We're creating a new digital safety platform, and Trevor has experience with that kind of thing from his time in tech. a digital safety platform for a manufacturing facility that operated heavy industrial equipment under federal safety regulations. I looked at Trevor Jr., who was scrolling through his phone with the kind of confidence that comes from never having seen someone die because a pressure valve failed. "When can you have the transition documentation ready?" Trevor Sr. asked. I stood up, gathered my presentation materials, and shook his hand. "I'll start on it today." As I walked out of that office, something crystallized in my mind. For 17 years, I'd been arriving at 6:30 a.m. to review overnight incident reports before the day shift started. I'd been answering emails at midnight about equipment concerns. I'd been training new managers on weekends, updating protocols on holidays, carrying my work phone everywhere in case of emergency. But my official job description, the one filed with HR back in 2006, was pretty straightforward. Manage safety compliance within assigned operational scope. Coordinate with regulatory agencies as required. Maintain required documentation and protocols. Standard business hours unless emergency situations require additional coverage. Standard business hours. 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. No mention of being the 24-hour emergency contact. No requirement to train my replacement. No obligation to maintain relationships with inspectors that the company had never formally acknowledged I'd built. That evening, for the first time in years, I shut off my work phone at exactly 5:01 p.m. Emma was shocked when I walked through the door at 5:45. "Dad, you're home for dinner. On a Monday." I decided my time was worth more than I'd been treating it, I told her, setting my briefcase by the door instead of pulling out my laptop. "Want to help me make something that isn't microwaved?" Her face lit up like I'd just told her we were going to Disney World. Tuesday morning, I arrived at exactly 8 a.m. No early prep work, no reviewing overnight reports, no getting ahead of the day's issues. I answered emails addressed directly to me and forwarded everything else to the appropriate department heads. My phone rang at 9:15 with a call from the night shift supervisor, Paul Hendricks. "Marcus, we had a minor pressure fluctuation in Tank 7 overnight. Nothing critical, but it needs someone to review the specs before we restart operations." "That's something the Director of Safety Operations should handle," I replied calmly, continuing to work on my assigned compliance filing. "But you always check these things," Paul said, confused. "Trevor Jr. is here somewhere. Trevor Jr. started next Monday, not this Monday. But sure, I can transfer you." The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Paul had been working at Caldwell for 12 years. He'd never once had to handle a technical safety question without me being available. By lunch, the cracks were starting to show. Trevor Sr.'s executive assistant, Sarah, came by my desk looking stressed. "Marcus, did you see the email about the state inspection scheduled for next month? Inspector Hoffman is requesting updated documentation." "I did see that," I replied, not looking up from my computer screen. "So you'll prepare the materials like you always do?" "That's actually a director-level responsibility." I forwarded the request to Trevor Jr.'s email. Her eyebrows shot up. "But Trevor doesn't start until Monday, and Hoffman needs preliminary materials by Friday. Then whoever's covering the director position this week should handle it. Sarah, I've been asked to focus on transition documentation. I'm just trying to follow instructions." She stared at me for a long moment, then walked away, shaking her head. Wednesday brought the first real problem. Our chemical processing division had a routine compliance question about new EPA vapor emission standards. These kinds of questions usually got routed to me because I'd been part of the industry working group that helped develop the standards. I knew them inside and out, including the implementation timeline that hadn't been publicly announced yet. The email came from Janet Myers, our chemical operations manager. "Marcus, EPA is asking about our vapor recovery system compliance with the new standards. Can you review our current setup and confirm we're meeting requirements? I forwarded the email to Trevor Senior's office with a brief note. This requires director-level authorization to access proprietary compliance data. Suggest waiting for Trevor Jr. to start Monday. An hour later, Trevor Senior himself appeared at my desk. Marcus, Janet says you won't help with the EPA compliance question. It's not that I won't help. It's that accessing our proprietary compliance data requires director-level authorization, which I no longer have as of last Monday. His face reddened slightly. You're being pedantic. This is important. I understand it's important. That's why it should be handled by the Director of Safety Operations. I can schedule a meeting with Trevor Jr. on his first day if you'd like. Trevor Senior stared at me, probably trying to figure out if I was being insubordinate or just following the organizational structure he'd created. Fine. I'll have Janet send the data to my office and review it myself. Be careful with that, I said as he turned to leave. EPA compliance is technical. One wrong interpretation could trigger an audit. Thursday morning, Emma and I had breakfast together before school. You're different this week, Dad, she said, pouring cereal. Different how? Home for dinner every night, not on your laptop during breakfast, actually talking to me about my day instead of thinking about work stuff. I could tell you were always thinking about work. She was 15 years old and reading me like a book I'd forgotten I was writing. I realized I'd been prioritizing the wrong things, sweetheart. A company that doesn't value what you do isn't worth missing your life for. She smiled at that. Does that mean you'll actually come to my volleyball game Friday night? I've never missed a game because I didn't want to, Emma. I missed them because I thought I had to. Turns out I don't have to. Count me in. The look of pure joy on her face was worth more than every performance review I'd ever received. Friday morning brought the catastrophe I'd been waiting for. I arrived at 8 a.m. to find the executive floor in complete chaos. Trevor Senior was shouting behind his closed office door. Sarah was practically running between offices. 3 people I didn't recognize, probably lawyers based on their suits and briefcases, were being escorted to the conference room. Trevor Jr. was supposed to start Monday, but apparently Daddy had called him in early for some kind of emergency orientation. He was standing outside the conference room looking like someone had just told him Santa Claus wasn't real, scrolling frantically through his phone. I grabbed coffee from the break room and settled at my desk to work on the transition documentation I'd been assigned. Around 8:45, Sarah appeared looking like she might actually cry. Marcus, we have a serious situation. Mr. Caldwell needs you in conference room A immediately. What's the nature of the situation? Inspector Hoffman showed up for an unscheduled preliminary review. He's asking for our primary safety documentation, and we can't locate the current version. Trevor Jr. accessed the digital files last night to review them before his start date Monday, and something went wrong with the system. The files were deleted. All of them. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting that information settle. When you say all of them, what specifically are we talking about? Our complete safety manual, all the equipment protocols, the compliance documentation, emergency procedures, everything we've built over the past 17 years. Hoffman is threatening to suspend our operating license if we can't produce the required documentation within 2 hours. I checked my watch. That is a serious situation. Conference room A? They're waiting for you. I gathered my notebook and walked to the conference room, taking my time. Inside, I found Trevor Sr., Trevor Jr., our head counsel Richard Moss, Inspector Dale Hoffman, and his colleague Rebecca Torres. Everyone looked at me the way drowning people look at a life preserver. Marcus, thank God, Trevor Sr. said. We have a major situation. Inspector Hoffman, is conducting a preliminary review for next month's full inspection, and were having technical difficulties accessing our safety documentation. Technical difficulties? I repeated, making eye contact with Dale Hoffman. He sat there with his arms crossed, face completely neutral. The kind of neutral that inspectors use when they're documenting every word for their report. What exactly is the problem? Trevor Jr. cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative despite the sweat staining his collar. I accessed our digital safety management system last night to familiarize myself with our protocols before starting Monday. The system had some redundant files, so I cleaned them up. Apparently, I deleted some important documentation by mistake. The primary safety manual is gone. You deleted the primary safety manual, I said slowly. The one that's legally required to be maintained under state and federal regulations. It was an accident, Trevor Jr. snapped. Defensive now, the digital system was poorly organized. Nothing was properly backed up. We'll just recreate it from your notes and institutional knowledge. Inspector Hoffman spoke for the first time, his voice flat and professional. Mr. Drummond, is there an archived version of your facility's primary safety documentation? I considered the question carefully. There is, yes. Trevor Sr. practically collapsed with relief. Excellent. Marcus, can you provide it to Inspector Hoffman immediately? I can, I replied calmly. But I need to understand something first. Trevor Jr. deleted our primary safety documentation without authorization, correct? It wasn't unauthorized, Trevor Jr. said, voice rising. I'm the incoming Director of Safety Operations. I have full access to all safety systems. You start Monday. Today is Friday. You don't have authorization until your official start date. Trevor Sr. waved his hand impatiently. Marcus, we don't have time for technicalities. We need that documentation now. I turned to Inspector Hoffman. Dale, help me understand the regulatory situation. If a facility's primary safety documentation is destroyed or deleted, what's the standard procedure? Inspector Hoffman didn't miss a beat. If primary safety documentation cannot be produced during an inspection, the facility's operating license is immediately suspended pending full compliance review. The suspension remains in effect until proper documentation is restored and verified, and if documentation is deliberately deleted by company personnel. Rebecca Torres answered that one, her voice sharp. That's willful non-compliance. It triggers a full investigation, potential criminal charges for regulatory violations, and possible permanent license revocation. The room went dead silent. Trevor Jr. looked like he might throw up on the polished conference table. You can't be serious, Trevor Sr., said, his voice barely above a whisper. We're talking about a technical error by someone who doesn't even officially work here yet. Sir, Hoffman replied, still using that professional, neutral tone, state regulations don't make exceptions for technical errors. Your primary safety documentation is legally required to be maintained at all times. It's gone. That's a critical violation. Marcus, Trevor Sr. turned to me desperately. You said there's an archived version. Where is it? I held his gaze steadily. Before I answer that, I need to clarify something about my current role and authority here. Richard Moss, our head counsel, leaned forward. Mr. Drummond, this really isn't the time for organizational discussions. Actually, Richard, it's exactly the time. I was relieved of my position as safety manager and reassigned to senior safety consultant reporting to Trevor Jr. That happened last Monday. My authority to access and distribute controlled safety documentation was revoked as part of that restructuring. Trevor Sr.'s face went pale. What are you saying? I'm saying that as a consultant with no director-level authority, I don't have authorization to distribute archived safety documentation without explicit approval from the Director of Safety Operations. Unfortunately, That position is currently vacant since Trevor Jr. doesn't officially start until Monday. You're playing games while our company is being shut down, Trevor Jr. said, voice cracking. Not games. Compliance with the organizational structure you created. But if it helps, I filed the original primary safety documentation with the Illinois Department of Labor back in 2006. Filing number ISM 2006-1847 CD. The state has a complete verified copy with my signature as the certified author. Inspector Hoffman pulled out his tablet and started typing. Rebecca Torres was writing notes furiously. I can provide my personal archived copy if authorized by someone with director-level authority to make that request. Trevor Sr. stood up so fast his chair nearly fell over. You're authorized. Whatever authority you need, you have it. Do I? Because last Monday you told me I was being reassigned and would report to your son. That reassignment stripped my director-level access. If I take actions that require director authority, I could be violating company policy and potentially state regulations. Richard Moss rubbed his temples like he was fighting off a migraine. What would it take for you to provide the documentation, Marcus? Reinstatement to my previous position with full authority, a signed statement from the board, a public apology carved in stone. I looked around the room at the faces staring at me. These people had relied on my expertise for 17 years without ever truly acknowledging what I provided. Now suddenly, my job description mattered. What I need, I said carefully, is clarity about my role, my authority, and my value to this organization. Because right now, I'm a consultant who was told to focus on transition documentation. If we want me to suddenly act as Director of Safety Operations, that's a different conversation. How much time do we have, Dale? Trevor Sr. asked, turning to Hoffman. Inspector Hoffman checked his government-issued watch. Under emergency protocol, I can grant a 2-hour extension for facilities to produce required documentation. After that, I'm legally required to issue the suspension order. It's currently 9:15 a.m. You have until 11:15, 2 hours. That's how long Trevor Caldwell Sr. had to decide whether his pride was worth more than his company's operating license. I need to make a phone call, I said, standing up. To whom? Trevor Sr. demanded. My daughter. I promised her I'd be at her volleyball game tonight at 6 p.m., and I don't make promises to her that I can't keep anymore. If we're going to resolve this situation, I need to know it won't interfere with that commitment. You're negotiating volleyball games while we're facing regulatory shutdown, Trevor Jr. said, voice rising to a pitch that suggested panic was setting in. I'm establishing priorities. Something I learned in the Navy, something I forgot during 17 years of working weekends and holidays and midnight emergencies for a company that just demoted me. Inspector Hoffman stood up. Mr. Caldwell, I'll return at 11:15 a.m. If you can produce verified primary safety documentation at that time, we'll proceed with a modified review. If not, I'll be issuing the suspension order and referring this matter to the State Compliance Enforcement Division. After Hoffman and Torres left, Trevor Sr. turned to Richard Moss. What are my options here? Legally, Richard replied, pulling off his glasses to clean them nervously. Marcus is right. You reorganized the safety department and stripped him of director-level authority. If he takes actions requiring that authority without proper authorization, it could be construed as insubordination or even regulatory fraud. And if I reinstate him, then you're admitting the reorganization was a mistake, which could have implications for the board's confidence in your decision-making. Plus, Trevor Jr.'s employment contract as Director of Safety Operations is already signed. Trevor Jr. was pacing now, phone in hand, probably Googling how to recover deleted files or maybe updating his LinkedIn profile. Dad, this is ridiculous. Just offer him whatever he wants. Money, title, whatever. Fix this. I appreciate the suggestion, Trevor, I said calmly. But here's what I want you to understand. This isn't about money. It's about respect. For 17 years, I've been the reason this company didn't kill anyone. The reason we passed every inspection. The reason our insurance premiums were low and our regulatory compliance was perfect. I documented every system, built every protocol, maintained every relationship that kept us operational. And last Monday, I was told I wasn't valuable enough to keep my position because you have an MBA and fresh perspectives. The room was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Trevor Senior, I continued, you created this situation. You decided someone with zero experience in industrial safety management should run the department I built from scratch. That was your choice. Now you're facing the consequences of that choice, and you want me to fix it without acknowledging that the choice was wrong. What are you proposing? Trevor Senior asked, his voice tight. I want my position reinstated, effective immediately. Full director authority, direct board reporting, and Trevor Jr. can work as my deputy if he wants to actually learn this industry. If not, he can find another role in the company. I want a 35% salary increase, formal acknowledgement that I created and maintained the primary safety documentation, and guaranteed authority over all safety operations without interference. And one more thing. I want you to explain to the board, in writing, why you nearly caused a regulatory shutdown by replacing your safety director with your unqualified son. Trevor Senior's jaw clenched. You're asking me to humiliate myself. I'm asking you to tell the truth. The consequences aren't my problem, they're yours. Richard Moss leaned over and whispered something to Trevor Senior. A long conversation happened in hushed tones while Trevor Jr. stood by the window, looking like his world was ending. Finally, Trevor Senior turned back to me. Fine. You'll have everything you asked for. Get the documentation and fix this situation. I checked my watch. 9:47 a.m. We have time. I pulled out my phone and made a call to First National Bank. This is Marcus Drummond. I need to access my safe deposit box within the next 30 minutes. After hanging up, I looked at Trevor Senior. I'll need someone to drive me to the bank and back. Company vehicle, since I'm now acting in an official capacity. And Trevor Jr. should come along. Why? Trevor Jr. asked suspiciously. Because you're about to learn the most important lesson of your career. Real authority isn't given. It's built one document, one relationship, one system at a time over years of work that nobody notices until it's gone. The drive to First National Bank was silent, except for Trevor Jr. scrolling through his phone in the back seat. Sarah had volunteered to drive, probably because she wanted to witness what happened next. At the bank, I retrieved the original primary safety documentation from my safe deposit box. 347 pages, spiral-bound, with the state filing stamp on the cover page. ISM 2006-1847 CD. Marcus Drummond, primary author and certified safety officer. Filed with Illinois Department of Labor, March 15, 2006. Trevor Jr. stared at it like I'd pulled out the Holy Grail. You've had this the whole time? Since 2006. When I created our safety program, I filed the original with the state and kept my own verified copy. Standard practice for anyone who understands regulatory compliance. But why didn't you tell anyone it existed? Because nobody asked. And because after 17 years of being taken for granted, I wanted to see if anyone actually understood what I'd built here. We arrived back at Caldwell Industrial at 10:52 a.m., 23 minutes before the deadline. Inspector Hoffman and Rebecca Torres were waiting in the parking lot, both of them reviewing documents in their government vehicle. Inside Conference Room A, I placed the original safety manual on the table in front of Trevor Senior. This is your primary safety documentation. Original copy, filed with the state in 2006, verified and maintained according to federal regulations. I pulled out my phone and displayed my banking app. This shows I retrieved it from my personal safe deposit box at First National Bank at 10:31 a.m. today. Inspector Hoffman can verify the filing number with the state database. Richard Moss was flipping through the manual, his expression shifting from relief to something like awe. Marcus, this is comprehensive. Equipment specifications, protocols, compliance matrices, emergency procedures. This is hundreds of hours of work. More like thousands, I corrected. 17 years of building systems that kept people alive and regulators happy. All of it documented, verified, and properly filed. Something your digital cleanup effort tried to erase. I looked at Trevor Jr., who couldn't meet my eyes. Let me be very clear about something, Trevor. When you deleted our safety documentation last night, you didn't just make a technical error. You committed a federal violation that could have resulted in criminal charges, permanent license revocation, and potential liability for any incidents that occurred while we were non-compliant. The only reason you're not facing charges right now is because I had the foresight to file the original documentation 17 years before you decided to reorganize files you didn't understand. Trevor Jr. said nothing, just stood there looking like a kid who'd been caught doing something he knew was catastrophically wrong. At 11:14 a.m., Inspector Hoffman and Rebecca Torres returned to the conference room. I placed the original safety manual in front of Hoffman. Primary safety documentation, original filed copy, Illinois Department of Labor filing number, ISM 2006-1847 CD, dated March 15, 2006. Verified and maintained according to state regulations. Hoffman examined the document carefully, then pulled out his tablet to verify the filing number. After several minutes of typing and reviewing, he nodded. Documentation verified. This matches our state records. He looked up at Trevor Sr. with an expression I'd seen before. The one inspectors get when they know they're about to ruin someone's day. However, we still have a serious compliance issue. Your primary safety documentation was deleted by company personnel, which represents willful destruction of required regulatory materials. That's a Category 2 violation under state industrial safety codes. Trevor Sr.'s relief evaporated instantly. What does that mean? It means this facility will receive a formal violation notice. Your compliance rating will be downgraded. Your insurance carrier will be notified, and you'll face mandatory enhanced oversight for the next 18 months. Additionally, whoever deleted the documentation will be reported to the State Compliance Enforcement Division for potential criminal charges. Trevor Jr. went white. Rebecca Torres was already typing on her tablet. We'll need a formal statement from the individual who deleted the files, a complete timeline of events, and documentation showing how you're preventing future violations. I looked at Trevor Sr., who was staring at his son like he was seeing him clearly for the first time. The kid who'd been handed everything, who'd never learned that expertise takes years to build and seconds to destroy, who'd thought an MBA made him qualified to manage things he didn't understand. I can provide that documentation, I said to Inspector Hoffman. As Director of Safety Operations, I'll prepare a complete incident report, including the timeline of unauthorized file access, deletion of required documentation, and immediate corrective actions taken. Hoffman nodded. I'll expect that report by end of business Monday. He stood up, gathered his materials, and shook my hand. Good to have you back in your proper role, Marcus. This facility needs someone who understands what they're doing. After the inspectors left, Trevor Sr. sat down heavily, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past 2 hours. Richard Moss was already on his phone, probably calling the insurance company to give them a heads up about the violation notice. Trevor Jr. stood by the window, staring out at the parking lot. Dad, he said quietly, I didn't mean for this to happen. I know, Trevor Sr. replied, voice hollow. But that's the problem. You never mean for things to happen. You just do them without understanding the consequences. Marcus. Trevor Sr. turned to me, his face showing genuine defeat for the first time since I'd known him. You were right about all of it. I made a terrible mistake putting Trevor in charge of something he wasn't ready for. I appreciate the acknowledgement, I said. Now let's discuss how we fix this properly. Over the next hour, we restructured the safety department. I was officially reinstated as Director of Safety Operations with expanded authority, direct board reporting, and a 42% salary increase. Trevor Jr.'s employment contract as director was terminated before his official start date. He was offered a position as safety analyst, entry-level, reporting to me, with the understanding that he'd need to actually learn the industry before having any authority. The board meeting that afternoon was something Trevor Sr. clearly didn't want to do, but Richard Moss insisted. All 8 board members gathered in the executive conference room while Trevor Sr. explained how his decision to replace me with his son had nearly resulted in regulatory shutdown, federal violations, and potential criminal charges. Board Chair Patricia Lansing was particularly direct. Trevor, you created an organizational structure based on nepotism and ignored the expertise that's been keeping this company compliant for 17 years. That's unacceptable. The violation notice from the state will be in our file for years. Our insurance premiums will increase. Our reputation with regulators is damaged, all because you wanted to give your son a position he wasn't qualified for. Trevor Sr. nodded, accepting the criticism without argument. The board voted unanimously to approve my reinstatement and the new organizational structure. They also voted to implement mandatory succession planning for all critical positions, with the explicit requirement that expertise and experience would be prioritized over personal relationships. Trevor Jr. attended the board meeting, sitting quietly in the back row. Afterward, he approached me in the hallway. "Marcus," he said, not quite able to meet my eyes. "I want to apologize. Not just for deleting the files, but for thinking I could do your job without learning it first. Dad kept telling me how easy you made everything look, and I thought that meant it was easy." "I understand," I replied. "Confidence is good. Overconfidence gets people killed. If you're serious about learning this industry, I'll teach you. But it starts with respecting what you don't know." He nodded. "Can I ask you something? How did you know to file that documentation with the state back in 2006? "I didn't know we'd need it someday," I said. "I just knew that in this industry, the person who controls the documentation controls the facility's ability to operate. I spent 6 years in the Navy learning that detailed documentation keeps people alive. I wasn't going to build a safety program without protecting the work I'd done." That's actually brilliant. It's called experience, something you can't get from business school. The next morning, Saturday, I actually took a day off for the first time in months. Emma and I went to breakfast at her favorite diner, then spent the afternoon at the mall doing absolutely nothing work-related. At her volleyball game that night, I sat in the stands with the other parents, cheering when her team scored and wincing when they missed. She played libero, diving for saves, completely focused on the game. During a timeout, she looked up at the stands, spotted me, and waved. I waved back, and the smile on her face was worth more than every board meeting I'd ever attended. After the game, which her team won in 5 sets, Emma met me outside the gym. "You actually came," she said, still in her jersey and knee pads. "I promised you I would. I don't make promises I can't keep, not anymore." She hugged me, which 15-year-olds don't always do in public, and said quietly, "I'm glad you're not working all the time anymore, Dad." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Monday morning, I arrived at Caldwell Industrial at 7 a.m., not because I had to, but because I wanted to review the incident report before submitting it to Inspector Hoffman. Trevor Jr. was already at his new desk in the safety department when I arrived. "I'm not officially starting until 8, he said, looking up from his laptop. "But I wanted to get an early start on learning the equipment protocols you wrote." I nodded approvingly. "Good. That's the right attitude." He hesitated, then asked, "How long do you think it'll take before I actually understand this stuff?" "If you're dedicated. 3 years to be competent. 5 years to be good. 10 years to be trusted by the people whose lives depend on you getting it right. That's a long time." Welcome to industrial safety management. The consequences of mistakes are measured in lives, not quarterly earnings. The incident report I submitted to Inspector Hoffman was detailed, technical, and completely factual. It documented Trevor Jr.'s unauthorized access to safety files, the deletions of primary documentation, the 2-hour emergency period, and the corrective actions taken. I included the timeline, the personnel involved, and the organizational changes implemented to prevent future violations. Within a week, the story leaked to industry publications. CEO's son deletes critical safety documentation, nearly causes regulatory shutdown, read the headline in Industrial Safety Today. The article detailed the violation, the near-license suspension, and the fact that the facility was only saved because the former safety director had filed original documentation with the state 17 years earlier. Our competitors loved it. Caldwell Industrial became a cautionary tale about nepotism and the importance of respecting technical expertise. The company's stock price, which wasn't publicly traded but was tracked by industry analysts, dropped by 18%. 3 major clients requested meetings to review our safety protocols and verify our compliance status. The insurance company increased our premiums by 32%. Trevor Jr. worked harder than anyone expected. He arrived early, stayed late, asked smart questions, and genuinely tried to learn. By the end of his first month, he could walk me through basic equipment protocols and explain the regulatory framework for pressure vessel operations. He won't be running the department anytime soon, I told Emma one evening over dinner, but he might actually become a decent safety manager in a few years. "That's generous of you," she said, helping herself to more pastas. "Considering he almost got you fired and deleted your entire life's work. He's 28 years old and was given authority he didn't earn. That's not entirely his fault. His father created that situation. I just made sure the consequences landed where they belonged." 6 months later, Trevor Sr. announced his retirement. The board named Patricia Lansing as CEO, and she immediately implemented the succession planning protocols they'd discussed. Trevor Jr. was still working in the safety department, now handling routine compliance matters under my supervision. He'd proven himself capable of learning, even if he'd never have the depth of experience that comes from 17 years of building systems from scratch. Patricia called me into her office during her second week as CEO. "Marcus, I want to be direct with you. Trevor Sr. made a lot of mistakes in his final years, and nearly destroying our safety compliance was the worst of them. I appreciate that you didn't just walk away when we needed you." "I considered it," I admitted. "Had a job offer from Baxter Manufacturing. Director of Operations, remote work, higher base salary. But staying gave me the chance to build something better here. Something that can survive long after I retire." She nodded thoughtfully. "How long are you planning to stay?" "Until Emma graduates high school at least. After that, we'll see. But here's what I want you to understand. The next time someone in leadership thinks an MBA is more valuable than expertise, I won't be saving anyone. I'll take that offer from Baxter and watch this place collapse from a safe distance." "Understood. I'll make sure that doesn't happen." That evening, I came home to find Emma working on college applications at the kitchen table. "How's it going?" I asked, setting down my briefcase. "Hard," she said, not looking up from her laptop. They all want to know about challenges I've overcome and what I've learned from my parents. What are you writing? She turned the laptop so I could see. I'm writing about watching my dad work himself to death for a company that didn't appreciate him, and how he taught me that loyalty is only valuable when it's mutual. How sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop giving people more than they deserve, and start demanding the respect you've earned. I read the essay, feeling something tight in my chest. Emma, this is... She smiled. It's true. You taught me that, Dad. The night you came home at 5:45 instead of 9:00. The night you chose my volleyball game over their emergency meeting. That's when I learned that self-respect matters more than other people's approval. Smart kid. She'd learned the lesson I'd taken 17 years to figure out. If you've ever felt invisible at work despite doing excellent work, remember this. Your value doesn't disappear just because others can't see it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop making their blindness your problem and start making your worth impossible to ignore. The best response to being undervalued isn't anger or revenge. It's demonstrating your value so clearly that it becomes impossible to ignore, then making sure the consequences of ignoring it land exactly where they belong. And sometimes, the sweetest victory is watching the people who thought they could replace you realize they never understood what you were really doing in the first place. Drop a comment below if you've ever been underestimated at work. And if you want more stories about what happens when corporate arrogance meets earned expertise, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'd be surprised how often this plays out in America's factories, offices, and boardrooms.